Good Wednesday, all. It's Footy Prime once again for you. James Sharman, we've got Amy Walsh, we've got Dan Wong, we've got Craig Forrest. This weekend, we have Canada back in action in what we're calling the He Believes Cup or the Canadian Shield, whatever you want to call it. But it's a big game against Ukraine. Now, I expect to see a partisan Ukraine crowd out there. As we saw last night, Dubs, in Montreal with Haiti against Canada, massive Haitian population in Montreal, and 15 to 18,000 Haitians at that game?
Yeah, I think the announced crowd was 18,000 and change, which is great because capacity is just below 21,000. And I think it was officially, I thought at least 15,000 were Haitian, but it's on record as being 16,000 Haitian fans. So that's a large proportion. It's a hostile environment for a Canadian women's team, but that's great.
How did they figure this out?
What do you mean?
Well, did they count every Haitian fan that walked into the door?
I don't know. It was in a La Presse artiple. Jean-François Théotonio. I trust him.
Don't be questioning.
It sounds very, very racist. That's all I'm saying.
Well, listen, it's something we're used to here in Canada, but I think we fully understand it this weekend in Toronto at BMO Field, if it is going to be a partisan Ukrainian crowd. Such an incredible story that they even hear, let's be honest. So today we'll talk some Ukrainian football, we thought. Andrew Todos is one of the most well-respected experts on Ukrainian football in the English-speaking media, a British-Ukrainian journalist. He is the founder of Zoria Londonsk, the leading English-language podcast on Ukrainian football, and he joins us today. Andrew, thank you so much. Welcome to Toronto, by the way. I know you're staying at some high-fluting hotel downtown.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really looking forward to having a little chat about this. And I mean, I've got a few Canadian Ukrainian friends, and I think this is kind of their Christmas, Easter, and everything all in one. Been a long time coming, and finally, I've got the chance to come over to see Ukraine on a different continent for the first time. So looking forward to it.
Well, you'll see the Ukrainian faithful en masse in Toronto. Like I said, there's a huge population in Ontario. Even in times of war, Andrew, sport has its place. National pride and morale is so important. I think even Zelensky said as much the last couple of years. But how difficult has it been to maintain a national program for Ukraine during these times?
Of course, it's been very tough. The domestic football scene has been impacted heavily since 2022. Each year you see the top flight, the Ukrainian Premier League, sort of lose intensity just from an on-pitch perspective, probably lose some quality in the kind of foreign players they're allowed to attract as well. For the most part, Shaktar still have a lot of money and can attract certain caliber of ones. But in the whole, you're seeing lots of stadia being destroyed weekly, monthly by Russian missile attacks and all that kind of stuff. Training bases, certain players, ex-players, maybe even some ones that have been playing more amateur football and that kind of thing, end up dying. Lots of Ukrainian football fans, ultras, have been serving on the front line since 2014 even, and so many of them have sadly passed away. So the whole footballing landscape really has been impacted quite negatively, sadly. But as we know, sport and football in particular in Ukraine, it's the national sport, everyone loves it. It is a unifying factor. So when the national team are playing in particular away from club football, people come to watch it on TV, be it at the Euros, be it during World Cup qualifying or similar. And even this tournament this weekend, people are going to be tuning in regardless of how late it is in Ukraine.
Andrew, a little bit about the club football side of things. I mean, tell us about Shaktar Donetsk. I mean, they left, I think, 2014?
Yeah.
How is that for them, and how are they dealing with that?
Exile for over a decade, really. But I think it helps that they have the Ukraine's richest man as their owner. So the finances haven't been that much under disrepute, I would say. But since 2022, it's got a lot harder, of course, because they lost a lot of their big foreign players that they expected to make some money on at some stage. But due to the FIFA ruling that was put in 2022, a lot of them were allowed to leave for free on loan to different clubs, run their contracts down, and then leave as free agents. And Shakhtar have been trying to sue different clubs and different footballing bodies and all that kind of thing. But I'm not sure it's been that successful as of yet. But they're still going. Like, they've been in the Champions League for the past 2-3 years in a row since the full-scale invasion. They are Ukraine's probably best club over the past decade plus, despite the fact that Dynamo Kiev won the league this season. And for the first time, I think, since 1995, Shakhtar finished outside of the top 2 in Ukraine. So they're going to be in the Europa League from next season, but maybe they'll be a bit more competitive there compared to what we see in the Champions League stage, etc. And like I was saying, the intensity, it's difficult to come up against elite European clubs when you're playing relatively low brow football back home, where a lot of people are playing 10 men behind the ball against you. You've got a lot of the possession and all that kind of thing, and then you come up against guys that can counter attack you with players that are super fast and all that kind of thing, and you sort of don't know what's hit you. And on top of that, you can't fly in and out of Ukraine, so you have to take long trains, buses, waiting at the border to get out on by vehicle, and then you have to fly to wherever you're going. So, for example, this weekend, some of the players that came from Kiev, they started their journey on Sunday and only got here at 10 p.m. on Monday evening, which is, I think, over 36 hours if you include all of the different time differences and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's been difficult for them, for sure.
I saw a quote in an article recently from a fan saying Ukrainian football symbolizes our confidence that we're a whole family who can achieve victory together. Now, before this particular war, I mean, Ukrainian football was intense. There were divisions within it. The ultras, the fan bases didn't get on too well, put it that way. Has that changed? I mean, I know that you are seeing more fans in games now than perhaps even a year ago, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. But is there that connection, that togetherness that perhaps wasn't there before? And how long will it last?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's actually been a truce between all ultra groups since 2014. They put down their differences and said, we have all a common enemy, and that's Russia. And they really have not been any sort of fights or anything serious in a stadium atmosphere between them in over a decade. Yes, there is a more younger generation coming through now that are all sort of under 18. They're sort of trying to do their own thing in stadia themselves because, like I said, the old ultras, they're all on the front lines. They're fighting. Their priorities are kind of away from football. Yes, they'll watch games on, if they've got a phone signal or a little TV or something like that whilst they're serving, especially the national team or their club side. But the new generation, I think, are getting a bit more trying to bring back some of the old stuff, just, a few silly chants and all that kind of thing. And it is kind of met with a bit of controversy from some of the older class saying, why are you doing this now when we're at war and that kind of thing? But I mean, that's just most societies really, a new generation trying to establish their foothold. And when the war does finally end, it's going to be quite an interesting dynamic, how these younger guys and the older guys meet up. But on the whole, as I mentioned, there is a unity between everyone. No one's fighting in fields or anything like that. They're very much, even some clubs from arch rivals, so Dynamo Kiev, Shakhtar, Metalist Kharkiv, Dnipro was a very fierce rivalry back in the day, and those two are fighting alongside each other now in the trenches, in battalions and all that kind of thing. So it really has been a real dynamic societal change in that respect.
Andrew, as it pertains to the national team, obviously to talk about performance almost seems trivial, right, with what's happening. But what are the prospects like for the team? To hear a lot of the players, it's an incredible sense of pride and responsibility to represent them. And you alluded to the travel that many of them know they're up against, even just to represent their country. But with this tournament here this summer in Canada, and then World Cup qualifying happening in the fall, Like, what are the prospects for this team? Like, is it looking good? Do you have the players available? And what do you think in the way of performance for this team right now?
Well, if we go back to last year's Euros, I think there was a lot of hope that having qualified for it, Ukraine could put in a good performance, because there's a very young, some would say even golden generation of talent at the moment. There's never been this amount of Ukrainian players playing abroad and in top flight divisions concurrently, I think, ever. Yeah, we've had Shevchenko, we had Serhii Rebrov playing the Premier League, we had bits and pieces here and there, but like right now, having, you know, Alexander Zinchenko, we had Mihajlo Mudryk before his doping ban, Vitaly Mykolenko, loads of other players playing across, you know, Artem Dovbyk at Roma was the Pichichi winner in La Liga last season before. And that it sort of all seems to be coming together, because usually what happened was the Ukrainian Premier League was like a warm bath or a golden cage. The owners were able to keep these players relatively easily because they could pay the wages, reject ridiculous high bids and all that kind of thing. But now, because of, I think, this weird silver lining of the war is meaning that these players are becoming a bit more ambitious and wanting to go and play in these top divisions a lot earlier, you know, learning English, for example, and wanting to better themselves and having that ambition that maybe some generations before them didn't. And yeah, there is hope. So this is going to be a great tournament, maybe for a bit of experimentation for Serhii Rebrov to see who he can maybe rely on in the fall for these quite crucial World Cup qualifiers, get a bit of a feel for what next summer could be if we qualify, because obviously it is over here in Canada and the US and Mexico. So I think both of these matches are going to be quite important. And then we've got quite a hard game straight away in September where we start at home to France. So very much final preparations. Then there's also the under-21 Euros, which are taking place directly after this tournament finishes in Slovakia, where a few players that we expect maybe to be called up in the fall are plying their trade this summer as well, just because it's seen as a bit more competitive from their aspect. So we will see. I'm looking forward to maybe seeing a few debutants over the course of the next week, because a few people have either got their first call up, been recalled, not seen them for a while, that kind of thing. And we have got a few injuries, a few players rested, just because after very long seasons, to bring them out here, I think would have been an even heavier toll, given some of the injury problems we had at last year's Euros. That actually, I think, ended up impacting us quite badly.
I'm hoping. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just, I'm thinking like it'd be great if Ukraine had an opportunity to play in Canada again, especially Toronto, because now you've got some drinking buddies. There's 5 of us, right? There's 4 of us right here. And I was also going to mention, I'm having a hard time understanding your English because your Ukrainian accent is so strong.
So stupid.
I am stupid.
I am born and raised in London. Just like I think most.
You're a fake. Andrew's a faker.
It's all right, Andrew. He takes the piss out of my accent all the time as well.
But I was going to say the diaspora of Ukrainians in Canada is gigantic. My nephews are Ukrainian. My daughters are quarter Ukrainian. It's something they're very proud of. It's a proud country, proud Ukrainian Canadians. And, you know, there's a lot of support for not just Ukraine as a country and what it's up against, but, you know, just overall, there's a real kind of brotherhood, sisterhood of family in this country and yours. How is it working in Europe and London specifically for you and Zoria Londonsk? Like, how did that happen and how are you moving forward with that?
So when I finished university, I just had a bit of spare time in the summer before I started my first grad job, and was thinking, I watch Ukrainian football for fun, and like I probably know a bit more than these pan-European experts come on to talk about things. It was always through maybe a prism of Russia and the sort of former Soviet Union and that kind of thing, using kind of the old Sovietized names and spellings of things and all that kind of stuff. And I just was like, I can do a better job than these guys. And I really have always wanted to promote Ukrainian football in a more positive light, not just, some one-off racism scandal from, some far-right ultras being the one thing you hear about every 5 years. And it's like, it's always something negative. And there's so much more to Ukrainian football than that. Ukraine have got a very rich history in the footballing sphere, 3 Ballon d'Or winners, lots of successful sides, lots of, really exciting prospects, as I've mentioned. So from there, I've just been going to games, been incessant in that, been reporting, covering, and all that kind of thing. And I'm in a very privileged position as a Brit that I'm allowed to travel, because most Ukrainian men, due to martial law and all that kind of thing, they don't have the permission to leave the country. I've got that privilege, and I use it to go out there to wherever Ukraine are playing, especially over the past 3 years, to tell people about what's happening. Because, maybe the English language discourse isn't that strong. There aren't that many experts that are able to sort of maybe speak about it freely, in a tongue that they can do so without translation. So I try and do that from my own perspective. And I've been back to Ukraine during the war, I think over 10 times now. Been doing different sort of documentaries, different bits of coverage and all that kind of thing to ensure that people don't forget that the war is continuing. Because, I mean, we've heard literally just this past weekend, Ukraine have had some successful strikes and all these kind of really interesting, let's say, projects that they've been doing behind enemy lines and all that kind of thing. But really, the war has affected more or less every single person, even if you've got Ukrainian family, if you've got, friends, or something like that. Someone's either fighting, someone has either died, someone's either been injured or something like that. So it's just my duty as being able to have this privilege to go out there and continue to let people know that everything is happening. And the Ukrainians are still fighting, really. And I mean, that it's embodied in our teams that we can go out and play, represent ourselves and do that as the best as we can so that people don't forget.
It might seem like an obvious question, but what is it like traveling to a war-torn country? I mean, a country that you before this as well. I mean, life goes on, I guess, in some capacity.
I mean, people have to. You can't just hide and try and not live your life. And I think that's the whole defiance. That's what Russia wants you to do: to go hide, to shut down, and not do it, to be scared and live in hiding. Whereas, Ukrainians are just continuing the best as they possibly can. I mean, some parts of the country are safer than others, like more to the west and near the Polish border, etc. It's a bit more sporadic, strikes and all that kind of thing. But you go to Kiev, they've got heavy drone attacks and all that kind of stuff during the night. It is pretty scary, but I mean, when you experience it, you sort of feel solidarity of what everyone else is going through as well, and you can sort of then relay that to anyone that hasn't been there. I mean, genuinely, yes, it's advised not to go there, but I genuinely would advise, if you have the opportunity, just to go and see how Ukrainians are coping. It's not like there's firefighting in the streets in terms of like gunfire and all that kind of thing. There's no trench warfare in the capital or even in Lviv, but you can experience, what it is like to live with that, and in the 21st century, where no one was expecting that something like this could happen and continue to happen.
You mentioned how. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, are the players aware of the support they're going to have here? That this might be the biggest crowd they've had outside of Ukraine?
I think they might be a bit surprised. I think they understand that the Ukrainian diaspora here is the largest outside of Ukraine.
I was just happy to use the word diaspora properly.
we know that.
Okay, here she goes. Of course, Amy, pedant.
And I think that they'll be taken aback though by how many people are going to be out here supporting them. Like, a lot of people have maybe never seen Ukraine play in the flesh before. So I think it's going to be a big occasion for those fans themselves, and hopefully the support's going to be electric, both on Saturday and then on Tuesday for the New Zealand game.
You mentioned most Ukrainians cannot travel, but footballers have been given that special dispensation where they can travel, and obviously many of them are based overseas as well. Around Europe. How are they viewed back home? Because a lot of these players are torn, right? They have friends and family dying on the front lines in Ukraine while they're playing football overseas.
I think it's a mix. Some people are fine. Usually, like the ultras, for example, that are fighting on the front line, they understand that these footballers have got their own responsibilities in an ambassadorial role to show that Ukraine themselves, exist. You see Alexander Zinchenko, for example, probably the biggest example of that, doing interviews all the time, being quite steadfast in everything that he does on Instagram stories, sharing news and all that kind of thing. And similar to the other players that play in the Premier League, in Spain and elsewhere. But then you will get other people that are like, well, why are they allowed to leave and I'm not, and all that kind of thing. But that's just any country in the world. You're going to get that realistically if it was in the same situation. But I mean, these guys have got special talents per se. They've got the opportunity to showcase it, to promote the country in ways that maybe others can't. Yeah, it isn't fair, but that is life sometimes. And I guess you will always have that kind of conflict of interest. But I mean, the majority of people that are football fans, I think, are happy to see their favorite Ukrainian player move to a big team, and so they can watch them week in, week out playing for those clubs and all that kind of stuff. It's just on the players' behalf that they have to represent the country and themselves to their best light when they're given that opportunity.
I mean, Craig and I represented Canada for a long time, and there's always a responsibility and a sense of pride when you're representing your country and you hear that national anthem. And your reaction to Sharm's question was that it's mixed, right? So how do the players cope with what I must imagine to be an incredible amount of pressure to be those ambassadors for the country, to play and to do something? We mentioned the word trivial before, but it's not that, because you're representing people who can't do that, who are unable to do what you're doing, but you're representing your country, you're representing the people who can't be there themselves. Like, how do the players cope with that?
I think it is tough for them. And I mean, we saw the pressure maybe caving in a bit at the last year's Euros, where Ukraine didn't get out the group. They were expected to. They lost in surprisingly limp fashion to Romania in the first game. There was like a mistake for the first goal, and then it sort of was just crumble. And potentially you could put it down to that maybe the pressure was a bit too much. But luckily, the majority of that squad was quite young. One of the youngest at that tournament. So they've got that experience now under their belts, and hopefully they can, use that and utilize it going forward. Yeah, of course, you're always going to get some sort of hate comments. Like even me and my friend, one of my friends is quite a big, TikToker in Ukraine, but he's also a British Ukrainian. He like showcases football shirts, retro ones, and in like cool skits and things. And he gets messages from trolls and all that kind of thing. Like, why aren't you on the front line? And all this kind of stuff. And it's like, people, you don't know whether they're bots, you don't know whether they're just like haters or all that kind of thing. You don't know if they're from Russia even. So I think the players themselves, the majority of them, learn to either completely ignore it and just focus on themselves and focus on their friends and family, the ones that are fighting, that are telling them to keep up at it and all that kind of thing. The players are extremely wealthy themselves. I think a lot of them donate quite heavily to different causes, be it for battalions that are requesting certain things, pickup trucks, humanitarian aid, all that kind of stuff. So there is a connection between them and everything that's going on back home, even if they aren't living there, for example. So I think it's quite a good. They will take it. They're taking it as best as they can, and we're hoping that they can build on maybe some of the problems that we had last summer going forward psychologically, primarily.
Russian interference on social media. I can't believe that for a second. I mean, that
all the negative that we get in our comment section, we're blaming on Russia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Russian interference and footy comment section.
You can find Andrew's work at the Times, the Telegraph, BBC, Sky Sports, Talk Sport, ESPN, 442, and on Twitter you can follow him at Andrew Todos. Fascinating stuff, Andrew. It really was. Thank you so much for this. Enjoy the match.
Thanks for having me.
On the weekend, there's a lot of people obviously rooting for Canada, but wouldn't be too upset if Ukraine pulled one out here. And let me tell you, So thank you so much, and you're welcome back anytime.
No, thank you very much. It was great to chat, and yeah, fingers crossed for a great debut Canadian Shield, and hopefully more invites to come in the future.
Before you jump, Andrew, sorry, your favorite Prem team, because we have 2 Liverpools, a West Ham, Ipswich former player, but these 2 at the top are Liverpool, live and die.
I actually support National League side Wealdstone, of Wealdstone Raider fame. But
Fame.
if I
Yeah.
We're all like, huh?
If I have the loyalty to a Prem team, it's Brentford. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, they got themselves a good little keeper this time.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. We love Thomas Frank a lot. I hope he stays there, because I think Brentford's just a fun team to watch, and what his job he's done.
And
there
he
as
is
well.
just tailor-made for that team, in my opinion. If he went to a Tottenham or a United, I think it's just too toxic, and I don't know whether he'd be able to cope with the kind of stuff that you're going to get from fans and media and all that kind of thing from that way. But fingers crossed we can keep a hold.
Yeah, he seems that he understands that as well, right? That he could have left earlier, but he stayed there. So yeah, I'm with you. Thanks a lot, mate. Really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Andrew.
That's Andrew Todos. It is fascinating. I mean, it's so difficult. Where do you even go with these conversations, right? They're so difficult. But
well, I went with his crazy accent.
Yeah, that was good. Break the ice there.
Which is the angle everybody was going to take.
Yes, of course.
No.
Well, I mean, Andriy Shevchenko runs the Ukrainian Football Association, right? One of the great players of all time, Sergei Ryborov of Spurs fame, head coach as well. And Craig, I mean, over the years, been some wonderful Ukrainian players, in some of the biggest leagues in the world. And it's still a decent team. And like you said there, young team with a lot of potential there as well. But yeah, you wonder what the vibe is going to be like at BMO. If it is going to be majorly Ukrainian support, which I think it probably will be, I think it could be quite an emotional match on Saturday.
Yeah, we were talking about this on the dark web last night about the Haitians that showed up, and when the motherland comes and they play, they're very motivated to get tickets and get them early, and that's why I think there's going to be a massive Ukrainian presence at this game, and it's going to be great to see. It does remind me a little bit back in the late 90s when I played with a bunch of Croatian players and what they were going through back at home. And the pressures they were under as well, sort of very similar. Why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you there? All these different things, and the pressures that they had to withstand. And it was difficult. It was interesting playing with them at that time, and I think that's sort of a similarity we're seeing with Ukraine right now, unfortunately.
Well, maybe Davor Shuka's ankles would have exempted him from service anyway back in those days, right? Some of your stories about the way he got around the pitch when he played at West Ham, right?
Yeah, he was absolutely brilliant. Obviously, one of the best finishers, even in his later days. But yeah, his hips were gone. He was like an old lab.
He's like Suarez, right? He's like a Suarez. Great touch, but not like if your hips are gone, you're waddling out there.
Yeah, but if you can get the ball, they can get the service where even if the mobility is extremely reduced, they will still punish you.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Because like when I think of him, I think of that great, like the checkered kit. Like that's the image that when you mention Shuker, that conjures right there. And it's obviously the ball filling the net. It's like one and the same.
Yeah. And the inspiration that they got from that as well when they finished third in the World Cup in '98.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I got to interview him actually soon after that. He was in Toronto for a camp, some Croatian academy. Brilliant interview. I mean, I was young as hell, but he was such a lovely guy, and just breathed and oozed football, and just had such great take on everything. I can't remember what I asked him now. Christ, I've got to find that. I probably got it on a DVD somewhere in a box. I've got to dig it out.
Could be on a cassette.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
VHS?
cassette. I think it's a VHS. I probably have it on an old like Betamax, the actual TV standard beta tapes,
SR,
right?
beta SR.
Yeah, it may be in one of them in a box somewhere.
I know that Davor was somewhat surprised by the Croatian support that he saw when he came here. He didn't quite expect it. That's why I was wondering whether the Ukrainian players, whether they're aware of what's going to happen on Saturday.
Well, the other thing is too, if you are a Canadian fan and you lose to Ukraine at the Canadian Shield He Believes Cup, it's not such a bad loss, isn't it? They're a team that you could pull for even in the World Cup if they qualify, right? Like, hey, this could be a great secondary team. Yeah. To go, hey, I'm right behind Ukraine the entire tournament.
Yeah. I think you still want to win, obviously, as a Canadian. And I think both of our programs are at a point now where, like last night, to see Stade Saputo, like there was the most atmosphere and excitement and vibe and buzz in that stadium that there's been since Wilfred Nancy coached the CF Montreal in 2022, because it's been devoid of anything right since, in the way of results, but also in a way of buzz, and maybe barring when Messi and Inter Miami came for the first time. Right. And the programs, to bring it back to Canada, both the women and the men are at a standing now of success and expectations and delivering on those results, where I think as a Canadian, you're less resentful of, especially nations like Haiti with everything that they've gone through, like the Ukraine dealing with the war and the conflict, that you're not really upset. You still want the result, but I don't think like you look down your nose at it and you think, oh my God, like as Canadians, like we're so far away from being a footballing nation, we can't pack the stadium with their own fans. But because it's an opposition like Haiti or like the Ukraine, I think that we can be more accepting of it. You would obviously want it to be filled with, fans wearing red and representing Canada, but I don't think we're going to deny them that, as Forrest is saying, to, the motherland shows up. Like Canada is a nation of immigrants that we've welcomed. So why not come out and grow droves and separate your team? Or, my God, I can't speak. Come out in droves and support your team, not separate your team, support your team. So
while you clean your eye out of morning sleep.
Sorry. You're right, though. I think there's probably many fans on the fence, right? Canadian Ukrainians who could go either way, quite honestly, but they're going to go Ukrainian for obvious reasons, right? This weekend. Now,
can I ask you guys, like, Sharms, you're obviously England for your second team, right? If they're in the World Cup.
Well, there's every chance England get to play for Canada finally in a World Cup, which is
right. I'm not going to put you at that, but just
Please,
your secondary team, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but who's your secondary team is England for good reason. Craig cheers for England a lot, but Craig, what's your secondary team on an international level?
I don't have one.
No? Really? See, and Dubs, what's yours? I know it's not the US.
Scotland.
It's Scotland. Okay. And so for me, I always like to see, and it's a weird take, but I like to see the CONCACAF teams do well. And I always took it as, hey, if we're playing in this continental space, and that's our federation, I want to see them do well, because that actually shows that we're growing over and over. And maybe that's a weird
it makes
take.
sense.
But I think it's also
right?
an underdog. No, even the US sometimes.
Really? Actually,
yeah.
I see that. Now you mention it, I see that.
And it's because of back in the day when I played, football at university, you get past the losing to I want the team that beat us to win that, because it shows us how good we were, that we had lost to them by a little, or that we were playing against the best team, 3 times in the season, and we competed. So there was a level of confidence building that gave me that kind of a vision or potential approach to who I want to see win.
I understand that, but I can't subscribe to it.
Yeah, see, I was going to ask you, Dubs and Craig, people that were actually, US was your big rival, and you played them many times. You didn't like them as players. I can't imagine you ever rooting for them in a neutral match.
No, I don't think so. But I get where the CONCACAF thing comes from, because the better the CONCACAF teams do, the better, the more spots are available to the region.
Yeah, but that's also from an underdeveloping.
Outside of Mexico,
absolutely.
They're always underdogs. So you can, Costa Rica's playing against Brazil, for example, man, of course you're going to kind of hope Costa Rica does well. Right. Because you always go for if you haven't got a horse in the race, I do. I always go for the underdog. I want to see a surprise here, a shock. Yeah. Brazil's different. I love Brazil. How can you not like Brazil?
Yeah.
Even when Neymar's playing for them, he's like, something romantic about that shirt. I want to see them just play amazing.
It is
football.
romantic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like thinking about the Women's World Cup, Jamaica making it to the knockout stages, and Bunny Shaw, and I wanted to root for them. And
Right.
Lauren Donald, their coach? Like, he was just so likable. But again, like, it wasn't necessarily because it was a CONCACAF team, but that factored into it for sure. And I do have to say, with the US, I will never root for them, but the equal pay fight and what that did worldwide to push standards for women's football, I became more of a fan as a result of that.
The
So there's a
CBS
political
contract for this year, right? It pushed that.
Yeah, it's pushed everything.
Yeah.
It pushed not only, I think, the standing of the women's game, but also individual federations and clubs and pro leagues to ask for and demand equity, or to just demand support and resources for their players.
Well, they took women's soccer seriously before anyone, didn't they?
Yep.
Really.
Mm-hmm.
From day one, it was back in when I started covering the game, it was Mia Hamm, and that era. Like, they were Brandy Chastain. They were household names.
Yep.
There weren't any other female women players who were household names in the world, because Nike was a big part of it too, I guess, back in those days. But they pushed that brand.
Yeah, but the beginning
won
of
it.
that was Title IX.
Right.
That was the beginning of that. That's why the U.S. and North America became, the juggernaut and kind of the gold standard for women's sport, is because you were mandated to take it seriously. You had to. So then you had a development path, and I mean that's huge, right?
And that we are still watching highlights. I think it was 94, or what was the World Cup with Brandy Chastain?
99.
99. That we're still watching highlights. The Americans know how to do broadcast properly, right? All the different camera angles, all the different slow motion across the board. That's embedded in kind of the zeitgeist, the culture, and you remember these things. And those are the legacy is what sports builds off of, and stories and future. You have to use all of them to build the sport. And that's one thing that Canada doesn't. I was watching the 1979. Asa put me onto the 1979
global story.
The
Squire
White
Barnes.
Caps. The White Caps winning.
The Squire Barnes documentary.
Yes.
On Global.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
fantastic.
From 4 days
really
ago.
Good.
It was brilliant. 25 minutes. Anybody watching it, look for it's Asa shared it, but it was a global presentation.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Just
it's on YouTube. Squire Barnes, but it was brilliant. Bob Lenarduzzi and
Carl
Carl?
Valentine.
Carl Valentine, yeah. And brilliant to bring that back and show how it created sport and legacy, and then actually
sport, not just soccer in that.
Yes, but it also helped
right?
build the BC Dome, right?
Yeah.
Like it forced them to think of sport as community build and getting, moving investment into a place where everyone's involved. And, at the time, CFL was booming, and so was the Vancouver Canucks. So it was actually moving the up a ladder, a rung on the ladder, which is what we have to do in Canada.
I knew nothing, really very little about the Super Bowl, soccer bowl. Sorry, it's before my time, living in this country. So I watched that documentary. I know Craig's talked about it a lot and what a big deal it was, but Craig sees it through the lens of football people, right? So I thought, Craig, for him it was huge, but for anyone else, was
Plus,
it really
he was
big?
there probably.
And plus
He's one of the kids,
but it was big beyond soccer. It was massive, and I didn't believe Craig, but I believe Squire Barnes. But some of the these stars coming over from England, and they were kind of looked down upon at first. Oh, this is like the English mafia coming over. It sounds a bit familiar, actually, Craig? But they won over the fandom. They won over the fans in Vancouver and BC. And man, I wish I was there for it, because it looked like quite a party.
And doing a callback to sorry, Craig, go ahead.
If I can remember rightly, memory serves me well. I don't know, but Carl Valentine was the city's player, like athlete of the year, and Stan Smeal, the great Canuck, was second.
Wow.
It was the biggest thing around in the late 70s. The Whitecaps were on fire.
And we haven't grown, have we, Craig, really? Because that would never happen now. Can you imagine a soccer player beating out a hockey player? Christ, we have the Toronto Star Sports Person of the Year award. And I know people who've been in that voting room who have pitched Atiba a number of times, saying let's consider, and it's been just dismissed out of hand. No, we've got Sidney Crosby won a Stanley Cup, so we'll go with him instead.
Yeah.
So that was the high point of soccer in this country, 1979. It's been downhill ever since.
They actually played the Sounders in the first match at the Sky Dome, first game ever played at the Sky Dome, and it was 55,000 people sold out. So it just showed. No, sorry, BC Dome. BC Place. God, I didn't. It's a dome, right? Yeah, BC Place. No, but yeah.
You recounting that, Wong, or just, I mean, whether we're talking about the Ukrainian men's football team or we're talking about women's sport and Title IX, like sport always has the capacity to be the catalyst for change, right? Yeah. And it can be like a seismic shift. And so like in the women's game, to bring it back to that, because that's what I do, like Title IX was that. And you didn't have the cultural barriers to it because there was an acceptance for it. There was never a 50-year ban like there was in Europe. And Rian's talked about this, that one of the big things, especially getting young girls playing, making sure that there's a robust development pathway for them, is that there has to be that cultural acceptance of it, you know, that it's available, that it's accessible to young women. So now the next step, I was seeing a study that as much as women's sport is booming now, women now are vulnerable to hate, whether it's on social media or, you know, you're being stalked. Like they get so much more hate and vitriol than their male counterparts. And so now it's the acceptance in that pro sports arena and realm that women have a spot there as well. That's accepted. That's the next line that we have to cross now, even in North America. So you can imagine worldwide, you know, whether we're talking about Eastern Europe, or we're talking about African countries, or we're talking about, CONCACAF and Central America or South America, there's so much work yet to be done by FIFA or national federations to move the needle in that regard. Like we're so much further ahead in North America here, but there's still work to be done. But sport, again, has the capacity to drive that change. And that's what's really exciting.
Well, you're right, because all those issues, though, are societal. They're not just focused on sport. However, sport is a platform for this hate. It's easier to get to an athlete than just some dude or woman, right? Because there are these brands and social media. You can reach out to them quite easily. So society's got to change, but perhaps sport can. And
so do the robots.
There's a lot of bots out there.
That's my point. Like, yeah. I don't, it's always interesting. Andrew was mentioning it, Todos, when we were talking, and he said, oh, my friend's getting hate. You never know what this means. And so, one of the things I always tell and remind our team is stay out of the comment section. Sometimes it's real, and take it, but always take it with a grain of salt too, because, it's as easy to go down that road and feel negative about things as it is to be pulled up by someone's positive comment. It all comes from your how you feel every day, who you surround yourself with, your friends, your family, and your inner kind of let's move forward with this and be resilient and adaptable. And so I was just thinking of our great interview yesterday. I'm going to say it was great because I really like Derek Cornelius. If you haven't, listen to that. But when he talked about adaptability, it's something, and Andrew talked about, hey, I thought, I could do this better than other people. That's what Footy Prime is, fuckers.
That's what I thought too.
I was literally like, we can do it better than others. And taking from Derek was be adaptable, keep learning, be a continuous learner. And if you put yourself as a continuous learner, don't let anyone and any of these comments hold you back.
And if you do get hate, it's a bot.
It's always a bot if it's big enough.
Pugs Wizard came from Moscow, I'm pretty sure.
I tell you, there's probably not a player out there, male or female, that have not had some sort of experience with bad stuff on social media.
Oh, it's horrible now, eh? So easy too.
Well, any public figure, anyone in a public domain. It could be an athlete, obviously politician, could be podcasters. If you put yourself out there, you're going to, at some point, take some shrapnel from idiots.
Yeah.
And it's up to you how you take that on. As you get older, it becomes a lot easier. Take it
True.
from me. well, like you guys, obviously, Wong is so new in his broadcasting career that every bullet he takes just leaves a scar.
Oh yes, I basically just go, hey, throw more at me. This is fun.
This
I'm
is
enjoying
good.
it.
I like this. That's your SDM type stuff, and I'm into. Anyway, SDM. What's it called?
S&M?
S&M?
Yeah, but but it's different though now. It's something else in there.
Oh, because of
really?
the dominatrix part?
Yeah, I think so. S&M, so sadomasochism.
Right.
SD, I don't know. You can tell I'm not really into it. I'm like, Wonger.
Yeah.
I know.
Tony's like, would you
He
get
knew
this right? It's
instantly
our community.
You knew
okay,
instantly what the D stood for.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonger is
straight away.
adaptable in many different realms.
The ball gag. I'm not unaware of what the ball gag does.
Oh boy.
Realms and
Bring out the gimp.
As you say, adaptability. Very serious topics to this, all within 45 minutes. Okay, listen. That was a great, really fascinating chat there with Andrew Todos. As mentioned, please follow him at Andrew Todos, TODOS, on the X. You can find all his bylines through that. We're back tomorrow. What's happening tomorrow? We may have an interview, but if not, we've got tons of comments still from our.
Yeah, we have to do a comment show.
Yeah, our Whitecaps chat earlier this week, and also from Derek. I'm sure there'll be some comments I would hope from today's show as well. So maybe tomorrow's a comment show. I just think there's something else going on tomorrow.
I don't know. Russian bots is our show tomorrow?
Maybe.
Yeah.
That'll be the title on the thumbnail. Russian
right.
bots. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, thank you, everyone. Enjoyed that. Back tomorrow. Until then, keep following us, like and subscribe. It really helps. Thank you. And
Really
give us reviews and leave comments. Cheers for listening and watching. Bye.